Thank you so much for investing your time with us on this Tuesday afternoon. I am Luanda Domi, a project officer here at the UNDP office in Kosovo, and will be the moderator for this roundtable. Today we have an amazing panel on Orange the World by Speaking Up Against Cyber Violence, where we will be talking about harmful forms of cyber violence against women and girls, while we will also be addressing following questions. What impact cyber violence has on the digital inclusion of women and girls? How can women and girls reclaim the opportunities that cyber ecosystem offers? How do prosecutors investigate cyber violence against women and girls cases, and what are their challenges? The main goal of this event is to create a better understanding of the nature and prevalence of cyber violence against women and girls, and share some of the best practices in Europe that would be able to be applicable to the Western Balkan regions. While the overarching topic is cyber violence against women and girls as a growing phenomenon, we will also be celebrating our champions in ICT sector here and hearing their personal experiences and triumphs in this sector by empowering women and girls in ICT and cybersecurity field. But before we dive into the panel introductions and the agenda, I want to inform everyone that this roundtable is being held in English, with an exception for one speaker who will provide her remarks in Albanian. However, there is simultaneous translation into English, Albanian, and Serbian languages. To access this translation, please go to Interpretation button, which is located in the bottom panel of your Zoom call window. Click there and choose English for English. Now, careful here, German for Albanian and French for Serbian, as these languages are not registered in this online platform yet. As our audience today is quite diverse, we have representatives from international community, representatives of cybersecurity councils, NGOs, prosecutors and judges, private sectors, students, and activists. This panel will also try to address all of these targets from a different perspective and personal experiences. So here is the format to give you an idea of what to expect. We will start with welcoming remarks from our UNDP resident representative, Ms. Maria Suokko, and Ms. Jenny Stenberg Sørvold, the Deputy Head of Mission of the Royal Norwegian Embassy here in Kosovo. We will launch a cyber violence video animation that was created by our office here. I will quickly give a brief introduction of our all panelists. And on the second half of our time today, we will open the second part of our time today. We will open the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you've been thinking about. The questions you can raise throughout this event in the Q&A button at the same panel, bottom panel in your Zoom video. You will see there Q&A. You are more than welcome to ask questions throughout the event, but we will address them at the end of all remarks from our panelists today. So it is with great pleasure to give the floor to our UNDP resident representatives, Ms. Maria Suokko, for her welcoming remark. Ms. Suokko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luanda. Ms. Jenny Stenberg Sørvold, Deputy Head of the Norwegian Embassy.
Ambasador Norvegijs.
Janushi, nacionalni koordinator.
Ms. Ikramie Oyalciu, member of Kosovo Prosecutional Council, Ms. Ljubica Pendarovska, National Coordinator of Women for Cyber, North Macedonia, Ms. Anila Smorgrab, Engagement Director, Orange Business Services. Ladies and gentlemen, participants, colleagues, it's really a pleasure to have you all here with us this afternoon. I'd like to start by just giving a bit of background on violence against women and girls. We know it knows no boundaries, cuts across borders, race, culture, and income groups, and profoundly harms victims around them and society as a whole. Violence against women has been described as a pandemic in Europe, where 62 million women, or 1 in 3, have suffered from violent acts since the age of 15. In Kosovo, a survey conducted by OSCE found that 54% of almost 2,000 women aged 18 to 74 surveyed experienced psychological, physical, or sexual violence since the age of 15. Cyber violence against women and girls has emerged as relatively new type of gender-based violence. Therefore, it has not been fully conceptualized or legislated against. Furthermore, there has been no gender disaggregated EU-wide survey on the prevalence and harms of cyber violence against women and girls, and there is limited national level research within EU member states. While there is no specific sustainable development goals or goal that focuses specifically on cybercrime, it can be seen as an obstacle of achieving a number of targets, such as those under Goal 16, which relate to violence and other forms of crime, such as corruption and arms trafficking. In addition, certain criminal activities can be facilitated by information and communications technology, such as the recruitment of victims of trafficking in persons or sexual exploitation of women, which would characterize a form of violence against women. Cyber violence against women and girls are often not taken seriously. This should change, and governments must address cyber violence as much as any other form of violence against women, using all the tools at their disposal. Kosovo has recognized the detrimental impacts of cybercrime and made efforts to address emerging threats of multiple forms of cybercrime with the law on preventing and fighting of cybercrime. But cyber violence has not been specifically conceptualized within the law as of yet. Nevertheless, it goes without saying that whatever is illegal offline is also illegal online. Women are disproportionately the targets of certain forms of cyber violence compared to men. For example, in a survey of more than 9,000 German internet users aged 10 to 50 years, women were significantly more likely than men to have been victims of online sexual harassment and cyber stalking. And the impacts of these forms of violence were more traumatic for victims. Perpetrators of violence against women and girls are rarely held accountable, in part due to the relatively low capacity to prosecute offenders. Social barriers, the limitations of legal recourse, and other factors hamper access to justice for many women, particularly for girls and women living in poverty. During COVID, 2/3 of anti-trafficking workers have reported seeing an increase in online recruitment of traffickers for the purpose of sexual exploitation online. And this is based on a survey done by UN Women and OSCE. In order to better address the prevent cyber violence against women and girls in Kosovo and beyond, there's a few points I'd like to raise. There's a need to sensitize the public on this issue by changing social attitudes and norms. Shifting the way online abuse is understood is the first step. There's a need for awareness-raising campaigns. Secondly, safeguarding measures should be put in place to secure safe online spaces for women and girls. This would include crisis centers, helplines, and education. Also, this will necessarily require resources, attention, and active participation of industry, mainly in terms of digital gatekeepers, civil society, and the governments. And thirdly, sanctions need to function. Laws as well as the will and ability of the courts and legal system shall enforce compliance and punitive action consequences for perpetrators. Also, full participation and inclusion of women at all levels in ICT is important to effectively respond and to prevent cyber violence against women and girls. Starting points could be, just to name a few, first of all, to improve girls and women's access to affordable and accessible mobile technology, services, and data plans, including affordable mobile devices with internet connectivity. Secondly, to raise awareness of tools and services online, digital literacy, and training for girls and women. Thirdly, engaging girls and women as content creators and developers of solutions, including those around combating violence against women and girls, and also addressing gaps in solutions. And lastly, on the legislative side, adopt laws to regulate internet-based crimes related to women, violence against women and girls online, and address other institutional needs like public review mechanisms and training within the justice and police system. Failure to effectively address violence against women and girls could significantly impede the digital inclusion of women in Kosovo and everywhere, putting women at increasing disadvantage for being excluded from enjoying the benefits of ICT and digitalization. This online roundtable provides us an open space to discuss the ways in which women and girls' more active participation in ICT sector could prevent cyber violence against women and girls, and how we can tackle the existing barriers to inclusion of women. We hope to gain from the insights of this brilliant panel and explore solutions together. So again, thank you for being us here, and special thanks to the Norwegian Embassy for supporting this event. Thank you.
Overview of gender-based violence and how it relates to cyber as well. And those are indeed some daunting statistics that we will dwell on during our discussions today, as well as your practical recommendations that especially on how to tackle some of the existing barriers for women and girls in an ICT sector. And this gives us a great start in our discussion today. Without further ado, I will also give the floor to, I actually would add couple sentences to what Maria just said, that this event is being organized in light of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And it's within the Combating Cybercrime project in Kosovo that is generally funded by the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Kosovo. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Jenny Stenberg, Deputy Head Mission in the Royal Norwegian Embassy here in Kosovo.
Many thanks, Luanda. And thank you also to Maria for the insightful remarks. It's a big pleasure for me to be able to address you today on this important event on a topic that is very important both for Norway and close to my heart personally. So also thank you to UNDP and Women for Cyber for hosting this event and putting two highly relevant topics, combining them and putting them on the agenda, cyber and gender equality. Working for increased equality internationally is a main and urgent priority for Norway and part of our substantial efforts to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. Preventing violence against women and girls and enabling women to take part in political life on the same level as men are two focus areas within the Norwegian efforts. Here in Kosovo, we are supporting projects within gender equality as well as cybersecurity, as already mentioned by Luanda, with the trusted partners such as the UNDP, the Council of Europe, and Democracy for Development. As has also been mentioned, this event is part of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And this year, the 16 days of activism is more important than ever. Already before the COVID pandemic, 1 in 3 women globally had experienced physical or sexual violence. With high unemployment, isolation, and much time spent at home, this situation is exacerbated. We know that to be true also here in Kosovo. The everyday life has for many become completely digital, as this event is proof of. And this provides for another arena where violence against women and girls can increase. Digitalization has undeniably led to a democratization of the public debate. Today, any person with access to a computer and internet has an endless opportunity to get and transmit information and opinions. This has given a big amount of the world's population easier access to the public debate and arenas where they can make their voices heard. But the way the internet works has also contributed to a harsher debate climate, where discriminatory and hateful statements, threats, and other harassment of persons with different opinions, or simply based on, for example, their gender or ethnicity, have become almost normal. This can lead to self-censorship and a decreasing participation in the public debate, which in the long term can be a threat to democracy. Women are main targets when it comes to several forms of cyber violence. They face violence online in a number of ways. It can be online harassment, bullying, public shaming, hate speech, stalking, virtual human trafficking, identity theft, and many other ways. We also know that women are being attacked in different ways than men online and for different reasons. In debates, often men can be harassed for their arguments and opinions, while women are attacked for being women, often in a personal, threatening, and sexual way. This is an impediment to women's freedom and basic human rights. It's a threat to freedom of speech and to democracy. Effectively, women are being silenced and harassed out of the public debate online, which also transfers to being silenced in the public debate in general. In my own country, in Norway, 2/3 of female politicians have experienced online hate speech. We know that women in Norway have resigned from political office and that female politicians avoid certain debate topics due to the pressure of harassment online. 53% of women politicians limit themselves online to avoid this kind of harassment. Now, fighting this kind of violence against women and girls starts with talking about the topic and understand the extent to which this happens and the consequences. Research on the topic is important in this regard. This must also be followed by targeted legislation and action. It is a societal responsibility which everyone, individuals, corporations, governments, and international organizations can contribute to. On the governance side, measures include gender-sensitive legislation and strategies, giving law enforcement and the judiciary expertise, resources, and tools to investigate, to support victims, and to increase the ability to hold persons committing online gender-based violence accountable. And especially important is to involve women in all these processes. Having functioning and well-known report mechanisms is also important. On a societal level, the change is connected to improving gender equality in general, to challenging traditional norms by changing how we view women, their abilities, and how it's acceptable to treat women and girls. So once again, thank you to the organizers for putting this important topic on the agenda to create a better understanding of this form of violence. That's where it all starts. I can assure you of Norway's continued engagement on gender equality and working towards women having freedom of expression in all arenas of society. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for your expertise and sharing the Norwegian perspective here, which is really in line with our literature review that we have done, for example, on women being disproportionately the target of certain forms of cyber violence compared to men. And you have mentioned here 2/3 of women politicians are more likely to be attacked with hate speech due to the agendas or talking points or issues that they bring forth that may actually be even similar to what themes and topics men bring into the table. Without this was a great insights, and I will use this opportunity having you here in the panel in the discussions today to also launch a video animation that we have prepared to raise awareness, as you said, in speaking up against gender-based violence in the cyberspace. I will ask our IT to launch the video now.
If someone sends you annoying messages, won't leave you alone regardless of you blocking him, ignoring him. If someone on the internet blackmails you, threatening to tell your family, colleagues, employer, if someone on the internet threatens you with violence or sexual violence, it all constitutes cyber violence, which is a cybercrime that is punishable by law. Whatever is illegal offline is also illegal online. End the silence. What begins as online violence towards women and girls often ends with physical and sexual violence in reality. Speak up against cyber violence towards women and girls. Nëse dikush të dërgon mesazhe të bezdisshme, nuk të lë rehat edhe nëse i bllokon apo ignoron. Nëse dikush në internet të kërcënon se do t'i tregoj familjes tënde, kolegëve, punëdhënësve, nëse dikush në internet të kërcënon me dhunë apo dhunë seksuale, Krejt këto përbëjnë dhunë kibernetike që është krim i dënueshëm me ligj. Ajo që është ilegale në realitet është ilegale edhe në internet. Jepi fund heshtjes. Çka fillon si dhunë ndaj vajzave dhe grave në internet, shpesh përfundon me dhunë fizike apo seksuale në realitet. Ngritë zërin kundër dhunës kibernetike ndaj vajzave dhe grave. Ako ti neko šalje uznemiravaju će poruke, ne ostavljate na miru iako ga blokiraš ili ignorišeš. Ako ti neko na internetu preti da će reći tvojoj porodici, kolegama, poslodavcima, ako ti neko na internetu preti nasiljem ili seksualnim nasiljem, sve to predstavlja cyber maltretiranje i uznemiravanje, što je zločin kažnjiv po zakonu. Ono što je u stvarnosti ilegalno, ilegalno je i na internetu. Prekini tišinu. Ono što započinje kao nasilje nad devojkama i ženama na internetu često se u stvarnosti završava fizičkim ili seksualnim nasiljem. Podigni svoj glas protiv cyber maltretiranja i uznemiravanja nad devojkama i ženama.
Thank you very much to our IT, and let's get started with panel introduction. I will do a brief introduction of our panelists today, starting with Klorenta Janushi, who is a national coordinator for Women for Cyber Foundation chapter in Albania and co-author of several research papers in cybersecurity and internet governance. She is a cybersecurity expert with more than 5 years experience in cyber field and is also serving as civilian expert at the National Authority for Electronic Certification and Cybersecurity within Councils of Ministers in Albania. Then Ikramie Boyagiu, who is member of the Kosovo Prosecution Council. She is a certified trainer on cyber crime from Council of Europe and is currently providing such trainings for her fellow judges and prosecutors via Justice Academy. Ikramie holds also a master on cybercrime. Our following speaker, Ljubica Pendarovska, has been featured as one of the 50 most influential women in cybersecurity in Europe 2019 by SC Magazine London. She is co-founder of Cybersecurity Corporate Security and Crisis Management Initiative in Skopje, is program director of the Marshall Center Security Forum, official representative of the NATO Memorial Federation, and vice president of the Adriatic Council. Anila Hyka currently holds the post of engagement director relating to complex projects at Orange Business Services that manages over 170 French and international corporations. She brings the international experience of over 25 years in different social and economic environments, is specialized in telecom sector and IT, project management and contractor negotiator, digital transformation strategies of enterprises, including development of new products. Welcome to our panel today, and I'm looking forward to hearing experiences from Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and France today. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Klorenta. Klorenta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luanda. It is an honor and a privilege to participate in this panel and this roundtable today. And I am delighted to hold a presentation on behalf of Women for Cyber Albania chapter in this amazing event. I will start with sharing my screen. Okay, quote of the year. Can you see my screen?
All good.
Violence against women is a human rights violation, a universal issue with severe impact on victims or survivors, their families and communities. The definition used by COE on 2018 for cyber violence is as below. Cyber violence is the use of computer systems to cause, facilitate, or threaten violence against individuals that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, psychological, or economic harm or suffering, and may include the exploitation of the individual's circumstances, characteristics, or vulnerabilities. Since more and more people can easily access the internet and social media, cyber violence against women and girls is an increasing concern. Despite the lack of data, EU estimates show that 1 in 10 women have experienced some form of cyber violence since the age of 15. Some form of cyber violence are shown in this slide. There are various forms of cyber violence against women and girls, including but not limited to cyber stalking, to non-consensual pornography or revenge porn, gender-based slurs and harassment, slut shaming, sextortion, rape and death threats, doxing, and electronically enabled trafficking. For those who are not familiar with the definition of the different forms of manifesting cyber violence, here are the behaviors and the definition for some of the most often manifested forms of cyber violence, starting from exclusion, which is the rejection of a person from an online group, provoking her social marginalization and exclusion. Online harassment, which is the repetition of harassment behaviors on the internet, including insults, mocking, slanders, and so on, name calling, gossiping. Cyberstalking, which involves continual threatening and sending of rude messages. Cyber persecution, which is continuous and repetitive harassment, denigration, insulting, and threats. And last but not least, trolling, which is the persistent abusive comments on a website. Why is it so important to address the phenomenon of cyber violence against women and girls? According to UN Women in the US, 2 out of every 10 young women aged 18 to 29 have been sexually harassed online, and 1 in 2 say they were sent unwarranted explicit messages or images. Some other statistics come from Canada, where 1 in 5 women reported that they had experienced online harassment in 2018. In France, 15% of women said that they experienced some form of cyber harassment in the same survey. In the EU, 1 in 10 women report having experienced cyber harassment since age of 15. And the next slide compares cyber violence to violence. If violence is conducted face-to-face, cyber violence is conducted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days in a year. Violence is limited to onlookers. Meanwhile, cyber violence is shared by a wide audience. It can go viral in a matter of seconds. We can find a safe place or we can escape violence, but it is hard to escape cyber violence. There is no safe place to it. Violence can be identified. Cyber violence can be anonymous. We can see facial or body reaction of target and onlookers in a violent situation, but it is harder to empathize with the target during a cyber violence act because there are no geographical limitations to it, and the target sometimes can easily become the bully. Since we are talking about bully, which is cyberbullying in the online ecosystem, it is also one of the most manifested forms of cyber violence. Bullying is generally understood as an aggressive and intentional act or behavior carried out by a group or an individual repeatedly and over time against a victim who cannot easily defend him or herself. At the moment that bullying is conducted on the internet via the ICT tools, it is the term cyberbullying that it is used in this time. So cyberbullying is used to describe bullying taking place on the internet, mostly through mobile phones and social media. It is important to learn our fellows and most important our children to not be a victim of cyberbullying. And how can we avoid being a victim of cyberbullying is by talking about bullying in general with friends, with teachers, with family. to discuss what personal information is appropriate and to tell others what it is not appropriate, to visit some popular teen sites with their parents, teachers, or friends, and to discuss what they see there and what could be a danger to our children online. And last but not least, we as a society should learn to develop realistic expectations for both personal and online relationships. The most important thing or message when we talk about cyberbullying is to be private, to keep our passwords, our pictures and secrets to ourselves, to not reply in anger, to stop and block, and to tell someone that someone is being rude to us behind the screen, to save the evidence on our computer or to print it out, and also to Google ourselves. The next slide will have information on some of the good practices in the European area. In the UK, for example, in April 2015, it became a criminal offense with maximum 2 years imprisonment to share private sexual photographs or videos without the subject's consent, providing the intent of causing distress to those targeted. In September 2016, it was announced that more than 200 people had been prosecuted since the law came into effect. Meanwhile, in 2016, France adopted the Digital Republic Law, which entails a harsher sanctioning to those found guilty of revenge porn. Under new legislation, perpetrators face a 2-year prison sentence. Similar provisions were enacted by a German court, which in 2014 made it illegal to store intimate photographs of a former partner after they have called for their deletion. In 2009, in the UK, was launched the National Centre for Cyber Stalking Research, which aims to provide research and analysis into the prevalence, motivations, impacts, and risk assessment of cyber violence against women and girls. In 2011, the Center published the results of a study on the prevalence, nature, and impact of cyber stalking, and is currently conducting a survey investigating the impact and prevalence of revenge porn. Subsequently, in 2015, a helpline for victims of revenge porn was established, receiving almost 2,000 calls in its first 6 months. I have also brought the national approach and best practice in this topic. In Albania, in 2013, was signed for the first time during the Safer Internet Day in 7th of February, the Code of Conduct for Responsible Use of ICT between the largest internet service providers companies in the Republic of Albania, and the same Code of Conduct or Code of Ethics was revised and were added more stakeholders in the national area, internet service providers, in order to ensure safer internet, not only for children, but also for women, to avoid all the ways that cyber violence is expressed and manifested. Another good example and best practice from Albania is this form, which can be found, it is a reporting form, which can be found in the website of the National Authority for Electronic Certification and Cybersecurity. The website is ces.gov.il. This form is for everyone who can report anonymously or not the unlawful content that they are experiencing or that they have seen online. Here can be reported images that contain cyberbullying information, pornography with young people, or violent extremism and radicalization online, and all the reports will be handled in complete confidentiality by the responsible authorities to make the assessment of the case, as well as to take immediate action against the contents. The focus of all the platform is to create a safer cyber ecosystem, collaborating with all the stakeholders responsible to this topic. We are not invisible online, and anything we post can be traced back to us, so it is important to monitor our online reputation all the time. And before my son wakes up, I would just like to mention some recommendations at the end of my presentation. There is a need for awareness-raising campaigns, educating women and girls about violence against women and girls, and about cyber violence against women and girls, their legal rights and available support services. Secondly, training on cyber violence against women and girls with a gender perspective should be introduced to police responders to cyber crime through manuals and dedicated workshops in the national level. And last but not least, prevention measures should be developed that include the ICT sector, and also including adoption of self-regulatory standards to avoid harmful gender stereotyping and the spreading of degrading images of women or images that associate sex with violence. And here I can bring also the same example of code of conduct signed between internet service providers in Albania. You can also in Kosovo adopt the same practice by signing a code of conduct between the largest internet service providers, and also National Cybersecurity Council of Kosovo can be a part of this agreement in order to add more critical value to it and to have the results that you need to have a safer cyber ecosystem in Kosovo. I would like to thank you for your attention. And should you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klorenta, and not only for presenting today, but also for being our co-host for this event. We truly appreciate your expertise and investing time on this Tuesday afternoon with us, as well as for revealing to us forms of cyber gender-based violence. Actually, the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights has defined GBV as violence that is directed against a woman because she is a woman, or that affects women disproportionately. This includes physical, sexual, and/or emotional or psychological harm, and has been committed both offline and online. On the following topic, just so we get an entire picture of the magnitude of the cyber gender-based violence, we will hear from Ikramia on challenges in prosecuting cyber crimes in Kosovo, and how traditional criminal acts have been transferred now as well online. Ikramia, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing your perspective on this.
Faleminderit, Luanda.
I also am pleased that I am part of this roundtable to give my contribution.
Këtë temë kaq të rëndësishme si kjo e sotme në këtë tryezë për dhunën kibernetike ndaj grave dhe vajzave, por jo vetëm. Pra dhuna kibernetike është një term I gjerë që përfshin të gjitha llojet e dhunës që kryhen me mjete teknologjike, sisteme kompjuterike apo nëpërmes internetit. Natyra komplekse e këtij lloji të krimit, si ajo që ndodh në fushën pa kufi të hapësirës kibernetike, është e komplikuar nga përfshirja në rritje e grupeve të krimit të organizuar. Kryerësit e krimit kibernetik dhe viktimat e tyre mund të vendosen në rajone të ndryshme. Në fakt janë të vendosur në rajone të ndryshme dhe efektet e tij mund të përhapen në përshoshëritë në të gjithë botën, duke theksuar nevojën për të marrë përgjigje urgjente, dinamike dhe ndërkombëtare. Në fakt, krimi kibernetik është një formë në zhvillim e krimit transnacional. Veprimet inkriminuese apo format e shfaqjes së krimit kibernetik zakonisht grumbullohen në disa kategori. Më të rëndësishmet janë veprat penale kundër konfidencialitetit, integritetit dhe dujsëpunueshmërisë të dhënave të sistemeve kompjuterike, edhe këto përmbajnë shkeljet e lidhura me kompjuterin, si hyrjet e paautorizuara kompjuterike,
accesses, illegal access, intervention in data.
Të paligjshme e të tjera.
I nezakonitu prishkullevanje.
në të cilat parashihen edhe vepra të lidhura me pornografinë e fëmijëve, në këtë rast edhe të vajzave dhe grave, dhe veprat penale të lidhura me shkeljet së drejtës së autorit apo të drejtave të lidhura me të. Në fund, janë veprat penale të krimit kibernetik që përfshin falsifikimin dhe mashtrimin kompjuterik. Natyra pa kufi e krimit kibernetik kanë kontribuar në përhapjen e gjerë të aktiviteteve kriminale, ku kompjuter dhe sistemet e informacionit janë të përfshirë ose si mjete primare, ose si objektiv primar në kryerjen e këtyre krimeve. Krimi kibernetik nuk ndikon vetëm në ekonomi, por edhe në funksionimin e demokracive, lirive sociale dhe vlerave apo të drejtave themelore të njerëzve. Zhdukja e kufirit midis krimit kibernetik dhe krimit tradicional intensifikon kërcënimin kriminal, pasi kriminalët përdorin internetin si një mënyrë për të përmirësuar aktivitetet e tyre, por edhe si burim për të gjetur metoda dhe mjete të reja për të kryer krimet. Megjithatë, në shumicën ndërmuese të rasteve, shanset për gjurmimin e kriminalëve janë minimale dhe shanset e ndjekjes janë më të vogla për shkak të karakteristikave të veçanta të këtyre llojeve të krimeve. Vendi ynë ka ndërmarrë hapat e nevojshëm për krimin e infrastrukturës ligjore, por edhe mekanizma tjerë janë krijuar për të parandaluar dhe luftuar format e krimit kibernetik. Ekziston njësia për hetimin e krimit kibernetik brenda policisë së Kosovës, që ka kapacitetin teknik dhe trajnimet e duhura për të hetuar krimet kompjuterike. Edhe pse mbeten shumë sfida, veçanërisht në aspektin teknik, jo vetëm në polici, por edhe në prokurori, për të përmirësuar dhe për të marrë me sukses me këtë lloj të kriminalitetit, që në Kosovë është fenomen relativisht i ri. Derisa ndërmarr hapat fillestar, mbetet punohet edhe me tutje, për të dhënë përgjigje më efektive në zbatimin e ligjit, në ndryshimin e ligjeve, që fokusohen pastaj edhe në zbulimin, gjurmëshmërinë dhe ndjekjen penale të kriminalëve kibernetik. Kohëve të fundit, jemi të gjithë vetëdijshëm me faktin se organizatat e ndryshme ndërkombëtare dhe vendore, por edhe organet e zbatimit ligjit, që përcjellin vazhdimsi këto fenomene, në raportet e tyre të vlerësimit, të kërcënimit, evidentojnë se ka një rritje në sasinë e materialit shfrytzues seksual ndaj fëmijëve që është zbuluar. Megjithse këtij materiali vazhdojnë të ndohen, shumica e materialit vazhdojnë të ndohen nëpërmes platformave. Ndërka që materiali më ekstrem gjithnjë më shumë gjendet në faqet darknet. Ndërkohë abuzimi i largët i fëmijëve, i lehtësuar nga rritja e lidhjes në internet në mbar botën, vazhdon të jetë një formë veçanërisht e ndërlikuar për të jetuar, për shkak të teknologjive dhe jurisdiksioneve të ndryshme të vendeve të tjera. Derisa një numër i madh i fëmijëve, femra dhe i grave, edhe vajzave kanë qasje në platformat e internetit dhe mediave sociale, rreziku i shtrëngimit seksual në internet dhe zhvatjes vazhdon të rritet. Populariteti i aplikacioneve të mediave sociale me mundësinë e futjes në internet ka rezultuar në një rritje të konsiderueshme të sasisë së abuzimeve të transmetuara në këto platforma. Duke marrë parasysh edhe përdorimin e internetit dhe të mediave sociale, gjithnjë më tepër nga ana e të rinjve kosovar, kjo natyrisht se përbën një kërcënim serioz edhe për vendin tonë. Format e shfaqjes së dhunës kibernetike janë të ndryshme. Një prej fenomeneve që është në rritje kohëve të fundit, edhe në vendin tonë, janë ngacmimet kibernetike, ashtu siç u theksua dhe nga parafolësit, që mund të ndodhin në çdo vend dhe në çdo kohë. Trendet në rritje të këtij lloji të krimit janë të orientuara ndaj pjesës më të ndjeshme të shoqërisë, ndaj adoleshentëve, fëmijëve, vajzave dhe grave. Ndryshe nga ngacmimi tradicional, ngacmimi në internet nuk kërkon kontakt ballë për ballë, nuk kërkon forcë dhe ndodh kudo, madje edhe në vendin ku pritet që të ndiheshin rënia më të sigurt në shtëpi dhe atë përmes telefonave të mençur, postave elektronike, teksteve dhe mediave sociale që frekuentohen 24 orë në ditë dhe me qindra njerëz potencialisht të përfshirë. Sidoqoftë, dhuna kibernetike përmban veprime inkriminuese, pasi që përmes përdorimit të sistemit kompjuterik, ka për qëllim ngacmimin e vazhdueshëm dhe rezulton me dhunë seksuale, psikologjike, fizike, dëm ekonomik ose vuajtje dhe mund të përfshijë shfrytëzimin e individit si dhe rrethanat, karakteristikat ose dobësitë e tij apo të saj. Në shumë vende të Evropës, përveç konventave ndërkombëtare, këto vepra janë të mbuluara me kodet penale apo ligjet vetore të veçanta si ka secili shtet. Dispozitat e votës fizike apo veprat penale tradicionale. Prandaj hetimet mund të mos presin një legjislacion të ri, sepse edhe në vendin tonë Kosovë ekzistojnë dispozitat në kodin e procedurës penale që parashohin ndërmarrjen e veprimeve hetimore për këto raste, por edhe dispozitat të tjera të posaçme që janë të parapara në ligjin e veçantë për parandalimin dhe luftimin e krimit kibernetik. Po ashtu edhe veprat penale gjithashtu gjenden në kodin e penal, por edhe në ligjin e veçantë për parandalimin dhe luftimin e krimit kibernetik. Pra, dhunë kibernetike konsiderohet çdo lloj dhunës që bëhet përmes sistemeve kompjuterike, përfshirë edhe veprat më të rënda, siç janë terrorizmi, krimi i organizuar apo trafikimi i qenieve njerëzore. Kjo do të thotë se çfarëdo që është tradicionalisht vepër penale, tani ka kaluar në formën e saj virtuale. Ngacmimet apo shantazhet kibernetike, si forma më të shpeshta kohëve të fundit, konsiderohen dhunë virtuale, elektronike dhe digjitale. Konsiderohen si keq trajtim, dhe kjo është që çdo sjellje e qëllimshme e përsëritur dhe agresive e një individi ose grupi njerëzish që përdorin informacione ose telekomunikime qëllimi i të cilave është të dëmtojë ose keq trajtojë të tjerët. Në rastet e ngacmimeve, shantazheve apo çfarëdo dhune përmes internetit, para se gjithash, kur një grua apo vajzë ballafaqohet me shantazhe apo ngacmim të vazhdueshëm përmes rrjeteve sociale, duhet bërë raportimi në atë rrjet social. Do të thonë, ky është hapi i parë që duhet ndërmarrë. Pastaj menjëherë duhet lajmëruar rasti në polici, sepse në shumë raste veprimet e abuzuesit mund të ndiqen penalisht. Raportimi i hershëm po ashtu është shumë i rëndësishëm dhe jep rezultatet më të mira në ndjekjen e abuzuesve. Në shumë vende të botës, por në Kosovë, kjo është tepër e rëndësishme, pasi që të dhënat apo provat elektronike që duhet administruar apo fillimisht ruajtur dhe marrë, shumë lehtë mund të zhduken, falsifikohen apo të ndryshohen në këto raste. Por edhe për faktin se ekzistojnë kufizime ligjore në kozgjatjen e ruajtjes së të dhënave nga ofruesit e shërbimeve të internetit. Më saktë, ligji i veçantë për komunikime elektronike parasheh që të dhënat ruhen, do të thonë ofruesit e shërbimeve mund të ruajnë deri në 1 vit. Ndaj, nëse nuk paraqiten me kohë rastet, kjo më pas paraqit një sfidë të madhe gjatë hetimeve të rasteve të tilla. E rëndësishme po ashtu për vajzat dhe gratë është raportimi i kërcënimeve dhe mesazheve seksuale jo adekuate në polici, nga se në shumë raste veprimet e tilla të sulmuesit konsiderohen si veprime inkriminuese dhe ndiqen penalisht me ligj. Ruajtja e fakteve nga ana e viktimave është po ashtu shumë e rëndësishme. Për shembull, mesazhet me tekst me qëllim të keq ose fotot që shfaqen në ekrane duhet raportohen, sidomos kur janë fëmijët në pyetje, një personi të rritur, të besuar, një antarit familjes, mësuesit apo psikologut, nga se nëse nuk raportohet incidenti, sulmuesi shpesh do të bëhet më agresiv dhe do të vazhdojnë me veprime të tilla. Rastet praktike kanë treguar se sulmuesit apo abuzuesit rrallë mjaftohen me 1 ose 2 incidente. Kam shumë gjas që do të ketë më shumë sulme ndaj viktimeve, dhe atë për një periudhë vazhdueshme kohore, siç edhe ka ndodhur në praktikë. Pra në këto raste, viktimat duhet jenë këmbgulse, të palodhura dhe do duhet që në vazhdimsi të bëhet raportimi për çdo incident keq trajtime derisa personat të ndalohen. E rëndësishme po ashtu është edhe ndalimi i komunikimeve me sulmuesin, duke bllokuar adresën e tij postës elektronike, numrin e telefonit celular dhe duke fshirë kontaktet nga rrjetet sociale. Po ashtu e raportimi i aktiviteteve të tyre, por edhe i llogarive të ofruesit e shërbimeve të internetit, për faktin se veprimet e sulmuesit mund të përbëjnë edhe shkeljet e kushteve të përdorimit të faqes së internetit ose të rrjetit social. Dhe në këtë rast mund të kenë ankesa nga viktimat apo palët e dëmtuara. Sfidat konkrete gjatë hetimit që zbatuesit e ligjit i kanë në këto raste janë se veprat penale të krimit kibernetik trajtohen nga veprat tjera penale që janë të ndërlidhura me krimin kibernetik dhe që është një numër relativisht i madh i tyre. Këto vepra penale trajtohen së bashku, vetëm në rastet kur ekzistojnë ose konsumohen elementet e veprave penale të ndonjërs nga veprat penale të krimit kibernetik, të parapara, siç e theksova në kodin penal dhe në ligjin për parandalimin dhe luftimin e krimit kibernetik. Për shembull, këto mund të jenë veprat penale, hyrja në sistemin kompjuterik, vjedhja e identitetit, shmangja e masave teknologjike, keqpërdorimi i fëmijëve në pornografi, edhe vepra tjera të penale që parashihen me ligjin e veçantë për krimin kibernetik. Janë edhe disa bëshllëqe apo sfida të tjera që e shoqërojnë, domethënë, këtë natyrë të krimit, por gjithnjë më tepër bëhet përpjekje që në të ardhmen të krijohen nësi të veçanta brenda prokurorisë, me prokurorë të specializuar në trajtimin e këtyre veprave penale, ashtu siç janë edhe në vende tjera, që do të ishin identifikuar më lehtë kjo natyrë apo lloj krimit, do të analizoheshin dhe do të ishte bërë ndërlidhja e dekurive dhe formave të reja të shfaqjes së dhunës kibernetike ndaj vajzave dhe grave, por edhe ndaj fëmijëve, si pjesë më e ndihshme pa atakuar nga këto fenomene që në praktik trajtohen si raste të ndara dhe më të shpeshta të identifikuara si vepra penale të shantazhit, të ngacmimit, kanosjes, detyrimit, përgjimit të paautorizuar, fotografimit dhe incizimit të tjera të paautorizuara, por edhe veprat të tjera më të rënda, siç është trafikimi me qenie njerëzore, edhe me theks të posaçëm ndaj grave e vajzave dhe të gjitha format e mundshme të eksploatimit seksual, natyrisht të kryera përmes sistemit kompjuterik. Sfidë tjetër paraqet, siç e theksova edhe më herët, efikasiteti apo shpejtësia në ndërmarrjen e veprimeve hetimore për shkak të karakteristikave të veçanta të këtyre llojeve të krimeve, sidomos në rastet kur kërkohet bashkëpunim juridik ndërkombëtar, sepse pjesa më e madhe këtyre krimeve kërkon edhe bashkëpunim juridik ndërkombëtar. Nga se sulmuesit veprojnë edhe nga vende të tjera të botës dhe viktimat mund të jenë krejt në një vend tjetër. Besoj që kaq pata hapësirë kohore. Unë përfundoj prezantimin tim dhe nëse ka dikush ndonjë pyetje, koment apo diskutim lidhur me këto çështje, jam i hapur. Ju faleminderit që më dëgjuat.
Thank you very much, Ikrami, and I encourage everyone to use the Q&A button there to ask questions, which we will be addressing to all our panelists on the second part of this roundtable. I just wanted to quickly mention a couple points that Ikramia has raised in terms of prosecuting and investigating such crimes in Kosovo, because I feel that some maybe have been lost in translation today, and I think they are of grave importance. For example, in Kosovo, any kind of violence, including the most serious acts, such as organized crime and trafficking in human beings, now can also be committed through computer systems. This means that whatever is traditionally a criminal offense has now passed into its virtual form. Cyberbullying or blackmail is translated as virtual, electronic, or digital violence, maltreatment, and it is any deliberate, repetitive, and aggressive behavior of an individual or group of people using information or telecommunication devices and means that are intended to harm or abuse others. A couple advices from Ms. Boyagio were that of great importance, of dire importance, is early reporting give best results in prosecuting the abuser. In Kosovo, this is important as the storage of data by internet service providers is only for 1 year. So this presents a great challenge for investigation of such cases. And then report, be persistent, report inappropriate sexual threats and messages to the police. In many cases, the actions of the attackers and then abusers can be prosecuted by law, even though they might not be explicitly stated in cybercrime legislation. Now, I will thank you very much, Ms. Boyagio, for your expertise, and I'm sure that we will have a lot of questions towards the end. So please stay with us until the end of this roundtable. Now, I would like to give the floor to Ljubica Pendarovska, who will be providing her contribution in another subtopic on digital empowerment. And let's see some good practices and advices on how we can do that. Ljubica, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Luanda. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here with us today. Before I start, let me express my gratitude to the organizers of the event, UNDP Kosovo, and especially to my colleagues Women for Cyber from Albania, and to congratulate once again to my colleagues from Albania for establishing and starting their activity as national chapter of Women for Cyber. There are a lot of things to do, of course, in cyberspace, but also in cyber violence in a concrete terms. When I was thinking about what would be the most suitable approach for today's discussion and what would be the most valuable topic to discussion, I choose the digital inclusion in accordance, of course, with our organizers, digital inclusion of women and girls. And I came across something what was said during some last conferences which I was part of. We discuss a lot about can we imagine a near future where next generations will talk about gender gap only as part of their history classes and not something that they will live during their everyday activities. Why is that very important? Because first of all, I said then, and I will say it now for sure, that it is impossible in the nearest future to see non-existing gender gap in the cyber world, because gender gap is in cyber world is part of inevitable part of gender gap in general. But even if it's impossible to see that in the nearest future, of course, there's a lot to be done. And of course, there's a lot we need to do it now in practical terms in order to improve women's and girls' life in general. And of course, their everyday activities in a digital environment. So that's why I concentrate not that much on numbers and statistics. Of course, I will mention few only to illustrate, because it used to happen that human used to believe more in statistics compared to what they see or practice in everyday life. I will mention only few because I'm not going to concentrate on different forms of cyber violence. They were mentioned and explained a lot during our previous presentation in a good way, presentations in a good way. But I will try to focus to be more practical, because usually people say that women are not that practical. So let's ruin that stereotype and show that, yes, we can be very practical. As we are talking about numbers, it's obvious that many women and girls are being left behind in digital development. For instance, women are 12% less likely to use the internet globally compared to men, while in low and middle income countries, and we know that this part of Europe have some countries of that, like that, the gap between women's use and that of men is even higher. It's actually 26%. And I'm not going to mention the numbers which reflect how many women and girls are on, for instance, executive positions in cyber world, because they are even lower than the numbers we mentioned. And this is not only a question of connectivity, but it's about using the internet in a meaningful way. So let's first indicate how digital inclusion of women changes their lives for better. There was one recent report of World Bank indicating and claiming that digital divide could increasingly prevent women for accessing life-enhancing services like services for health, education, financial inclusion, and their overall well-being. For instance, their income and wealth, jobs and earnings, then housing, health status, then what else? Education and skills, work-life balance, their civic engagement and governance, and the overall well-being of women. According to the, if we have in mind the numbers, which were already mentioned during previous speaks, and of course these insights that I share with you, the main question here remains: how is life for women in the digital age, especially having in mind times of emergency and crisis, and especially having in mind the recent year we live in? We live a very difficult year. It's still on. We are still not out of it, so we still work from home and share everything virtually from home, not from our working environments. So let's mention some insights and challenging findings of relevant world organizations and stakeholders, which indicate why it's important to see in a real light how is women's life in the digital age. First of all, there are a number of policy initiatives in the EU and globally, which aimed at addressing the digital gender divide by stressing both the opportunities and benefits that new information technologies offer for women, but also for the economy and the societies as a whole. The current situation, but I would say not only the current situation, clearly demonstrate a persistent, I will repeat, persistent gender gap in access and use of digital technologies, digital skills, and online risks when engaging with new technologies. But although most of these gaps are due to a number of technological barriers, they are not only a result of technological barriers, but they are due to a number of non-technological barriers as well, including inadequate economic resources, lack of education and training, other socio-cultural assumptions about women's role in place in society at all and at the labor market. And girls, as we heard during Klorenta's presentation, when she was talking about cyberbullying, she mentioned that girls are more exposed than boys to cyberbullying. But I would add here not only to cyberbullying, but to other forms of cyber attacks and threats as well. So having in mind what I said and what was said during the previous speeches, it is unequivocally clear that understanding how the digital transformation affects women's well-being is one of the cornerstones for further improvement of women's life in the digital world. So what should be put on the to-do list today, I would say for yesterday, but let's start from today. Of course, we are aware that not in all areas or in our fields of our everyday and working activities, the gender discrepancies are so obvious and so deep. But there are areas where gender discrepancies are much deeper and evident. So we should start, first of all, to pinpoint, to highlight those which are of major importance. I will name few. First of all, access and usage of internet, and not only the possibility for women and girls to access the internet, but the possibility to use them in a safe digital environment and in a safe way. Then digital services, ICT-related employment and jobs, and ICT education field. Then we should elucidate the multiple bondages and symbiosis, existing symbiosis among different socioeconomic, political and cultural components and factors, then different kind of tech barriers. And of course, it is very important to mention here various stereotypes which we have in our societies, especially here, I would say, in our part of the world, which in a mixture promote the digital gender gap. Then we need more advocating forms for women and entrepreneurs in order to encourage female entrepreneurship in the digital world through some specific, I would say, gender equality target actions, because there are some numbers and some researches showing that those digital startups which were developed and which are owned by female owners are more prone to success in their work compared to their male counterparts, and that investment in female-founded startups in the digital world performs almost 63% better than exclusively male-founded startups. We need to work a lot on education, but when I say education, I don't mean on our national educational systems and programs. I mean that we need to work together on a European level and to promote a kind of harmonized European education curricula, but working closely when designing, working closely with the digital technology industries, because one of the problems that we are facing with is actually those with industry players. It's not always the problem in the legislation, but sometimes is the problem. I will talk a bit later about the prominent role of industry players for inclusion of women and girls in the digital environment. And we here in North Macedonia, the Women for Cyber chapter in North Macedonia did some, I would say, small research we started the research to see how women and girls image cyber security experts. It was very interesting then when you say to girl or women, most of our participants in the research, to kind of express themselves how they see how a cybersecurity expert look like, or someone working in cybersecurity field. It's interesting that they say it's always a male, a man sitting in front of a lot of desktops and working hard on some application. And it's never an image of women. And it's usually very interesting that when we say, what do you mean by cyber security or cyber world? It's usually some, in a technical way, women and girls usually see that in a technical way. So I mean that first of all, we need to work with women and girls themselves in order to build a totally new image, first of all, of the digital sector, and then the image of women in the digital world. I'm not going in details about the programs and policies and practices, but I will skip to right to social media and safety and security of women in virtual world on social media. Why I mention here exactly social media, and I will concentrate on, first of all, the biggest part of my expertise, more than 10 years, is in the field of privacy and data protection. And most of the cases related to privacy and data protection happen in an online world, but through social media. And why is it crucial to reflect on social media when talking about digital inclusion of women? Because relevant data are clearly indicated that every sixth cybercrime is committed through some social media platform. And in most of the cases, target are women and girls. And furthermore, why are social media so important? Because it was said during the previous presentation, they have what is happening online and on social media have an additional, in most of the cases, cruel fallout for those which are using the users of social media. There are a lot of cruel comments, malicious tags, so the detrimental effect is multifaceted and could be long-lasting and very harmful for women. First of all, what are the main factors about safety and security of women on social media? Lack of awareness. We need to create a level of awareness based on our understanding, first of all, how social media works, because I'm not sure, even all of us, we are using social media platforms. I'm not sure how many of us, first of all, are reading privacy policies, know something more about it, and even if we are working through one of those platforms, it's not a social networking platform, but it is a kind of networking platforms, now Zoom. I'm not sure how much we go deeper in the settings and privacy policy of the platform to learn more about to understand it, to understand what path do the data and or photos or presentation posted or shared they pass once they are posted online, and especially about the fact that virtual world is not that virtual anymore. It's a real life happening now. So we should bear in mind that we should work, it is very evident for women from coming from practice, I'm talking about from practice, that we should work a lot about digital literacy of women and girls. Because we should have in mind that safe digital components or safe digital networks make better life only for those who know how to use them, which means that only to those who have proper skills. And benefits from digital opportunities depends first of all to having appropriate skills, but I'm not talking about only digital skills. They are on the first place, of course, but I'm talking about other emotional, social skills, which are very closely associated to safely navigating the online world. And the second factor is that it depends on operating in safe digital environments. In that spirit, in order to operate in safe digital environment, first of all, lawmakers are important, also the society, civil organization, but also industry players in the field, which I'm going to mention in few words. So how to provide? I'm not sure how for how long I don't have that much control of time, but I will try to shorter my presentation and to have some time to answer questions. What we need to do in order to provide digital security, or in order to improve digital security and safety of women in an online environment? First of all, we need to highlight the substantial players, because they are very important factors, I would say prominent factors, when it comes to cybersecurity cycle. Then we need to emphasize their specific strict responsibilities and roles in the circle. So let's name few of them. First of all, lawmakers. They are important because everything starts with the law and ends with the law in a way. That's why lawmakers should prioritize efforts to repress different forms of online violence against women and girls, but at all levels, even at the lowest one in the society, not only on the highest stage level. Then, education system and programs, of course, I'm one of those advocating that children and students should be taught within their curriculum from the earliest age about online violence against women, because in that way we are developing children into responsible citizens. And I will concentrate a few moments on industry players, because I think that they are very important. Why? Because, for instance, internet service providers, social networking sites, mobile phone companies, website operators, software developers, they all play the role of gatekeepers. That's why it was mentioned previously that we need to sensitize the society, to sensitize the general public, but also to sensitize the industry players that they are gatekeepers in a way that they need explicitly recognize when an act of cyber violence in a different form happens through their platforms or their networks, to clearly acknowledge it as unlawful behavior and to show expanded collaboration with law enforcement. Also, to put in place effective takedown procedures when it comes for abusive, harmful content, and to build more transparent reports on cyber violence against women and girls records. So that's why industrial actors have a very important role to play. But since I see that I don't have much time to talk about it, that will be for some other discussion maybe in the future. And finally, I will finish that with incorporation of 3 basic practices. Sensitization, it was mentioned, safeguards, and sanctions. Thank you for your attention. I will stop here and we'll have, I hope so, some questions to answer at the end of this discussion. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much, Ljubica. In light of the time, I will not do any comments, but we will save that for the end of the panel discussions. Now I will pass the floor to Anila to hear more about opportunities the cyber system offers to girls and the potential impact the technology on women and women's social and economic empowerment will have. Anila, floor is yours.
Thank you, Luanda. Thank you for this invitation. And I was really glad actually when I got this, because it's not very often that the business side is invited in such subjects and awareness. I thank you, Ljubica, because she took some part of my subject as well. So I'll try to skip in my presentation. I'll try to share my my screen and my presentation. So we'll go. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Anila.
Okay. So the subject I try to understand actually is like digital empower. How to empower women and girls, and particularly in the countries where the access to digital, to internet, to equipment are not very obvious, like Albania or Kosovo. And that's, I guess, my the subject also is addressing this. So I tried to put few words and to put in perspective what does it mean actually to be part of this digital evolution. And if you see, like, I have a career which has been entirely in computer science and telecommunication and in business, so, and in 5 different countries. So I'll skip this part. With this page, I wanted to say that this is what digital can empower. I mean, empower us itself. I don't know why my presentation is not, voila. I don't know how many of you has known this movie, The Net. Do you see the screen? It's a movie 1995, which is really put me, I was a student in University of Oslo when I saw this movie, and actually I had just learned about cybersecurity, Kerberos algorithms, etc. I'm not talking about the movie, but it's like it's a thriller which put in perspective web was just started at the academic areas, which was like we would have access to different in the academic and with different universities, but very limited. And the communication in groups was just like small emails groups. And this movie, when it came, is like in 3 days, she is a girl in high tech, very advanced, working in her life was entirely online and on her phone, that is our reality today. And within 3 days, it happened something and her entire life was wiped out. She didn't exist anymore. And actually, this could be our reality. At that time, we thought, wow, I was like, this movie put me in perspective that I'll just give an example. It took me many years before I decided to use Uber for transportation. For example, is one of the examples, or internet buying. Now, if we see like what is the digital or this evolution of the technology and how this is empower our life, this is just the historical things, and I'll go very quickly because it's probably out of even the scope of the technical part. But early in 70s until 85, we had very secure networks because each companies has their own computers, etc. And it's like started to open up with the network, with private networks, etc. So even the threats in our network, in the data, it was very limited. Today, we are exposed to cloud, to connection of equipment, to social medias, and everything is on the net. And even our life is on the net. Now, I have just put it in this. I don't know how much you're interested in. And this is like, together with the industry, how it is the evolution of the law, because Lubica and some others mentioned that it's important that the laws are there. And unfortunately, the technology and internet has moved faster than the laws were in place to respect. And even today, we don't have everything. So this is like what happened in France and what happened in Europe. And today we know that we have even advanced. And in worldwide, we have some standards which companies and institution has to apply. Our world today, like does it mean empower, digital empower? I was trying to put in perspective and say, okay, this is our world today. This is empower, digital empower. We have in the industry, in the business, like we have our life at workplace has changed completely. The concept of banks has changed. The industry is becoming more and more automatization, connected. Transports, we are now talking about cars that can drive themselves, like connected cars. In healthcare, and we are talking about, I don't know, I guess everybody knows now, concept of smart cities. So that's why I put. And today there are some figures that I found in EU pages that we have today counted over 26.66 billion devices, so which is in the internet, which means that daily, today, you could have like over 100 equipments that are new connected to the internet. And this evolution has put in perspective that those companies, that the industries, the business, had to adapt to the social environment, social media. So in the beginning, I remember in the companies having Facebook or connecting to Facebook was forbidden. In my network, for example, in Orange, you couldn't even click on the Facebook because it was stopped. It was like prevented from the beginning in the network. Today, it's a part of our promotion, for example, or like LinkedIn. And the same with our lives, like the daily life. This is our society now. Like we are all, most of our life, it's spent in the phone, on the smart tablets. I know for my life has been my digital tablets, I would say, or first one, or mobile phone started in 1995, for example. It's like we now think, I don't know how we lived before, or sometimes I even turn off everything for different reasons, but one of the reasons is just to get to breathe a little bit. But this, and now it's becoming even more interesting with the 5G. I'm not going into 5G because I know there are different opinions about that. But what is important to say here is that this evolution of digital and technology, which is like, it's come exponentially comparing to the technology in the last century. It enables also what we call it hackers and all this dark network, okay? Enabling our life, changing our life, also has made them more powerful. It's like, and then in this case, we count different types of hackers and they have different types of objectives. Why I'm mentioning here? Because indirect, those are related also to the policies and what will be the next steps that the government should take in order to get better protected, particularly on the countries like Albania. I am talking about Albania because I know a little bit, but could be probably for Kosovo and Macedonia, that the awareness of being attacked might not be probably so much even on the systems of the government. Why I'm saying is because we have had, you have like even like a type of kids that just hacks for fun and even do something damages. You have this type of cyber attacks and hackers that's like are organized, very well organized, and you have them all on the dark net. I don't know how many people knows about dark net, but Lubica and Klorenta might know, and I guess Ikrami also should know about, at least as a concept, what is the dark net. The dark net is like, it's the internet, but for the criminal, the organized crime, and the terrorism as well. And then you have the hackings for a cause, could be a positive cause, sometimes it can happen, like there has been some hacking on the certain websites when they want to make a point, or for the terrorism sites, which I'll just give the example. And the last one is a type of industry espionage, target distraction, or even state surveillance. So based on this one, what has made this awareness is to increase the work and to increase the efforts on creating more platforms and more softwares, more algorithms, and different level of security in the system. I liked when Lubica said that the business and the companies should be aware and then try to prevent in the network. That's what we do. So and then of course there are regulations like being compliance in different level of in a network, in platform, even in the access, in order to make it safer. This is just the example. This is in French because those are the examples that are picked on the last year, which is like different attacks that the companies or different examples based on the type of hacks that. So I'll just mention one. It is in 2013, for example, 3 students from high school attacked our network, Orange network. and they were asking for money. And now they are in jails and there are some other issues. But, or for example, in February, Bouygues Construction, it's a huge company, was attacked. It was attacked in the network, stolen the certain access and the services, and they were asking for money. It's like, that means that they block your certain areas, which is like sensitive. Either they sell it to in the darknet to the others, so they attack you and they get your entry point to your system and they sell it in the darknet, or they just block the entire, for example, certain areas of the information. They ask you for money in order to, and this kind of attacks could be also individually, and we know many of those that has been individually. So I'll go faster because so I wanted to give an example what happens even during the COVID. We thought that our life was stopped in COVID because we're all isolated, being at home, but no. And this happened, for example, in France, like in Orange. This is an example, a model of what we did as a company to provide, to make continuity of the life of different companies, our clients, easier. Why? Because suddenly companies had to change the way, like make available for people to work from home. So it started with information and alert. We were isolated, confined. And then it was the need to set up the environment for the teleworking. It's like to set up the network, to set up even computers. Sometimes we had to loan the computers. So, and then there were different platforms. I'll just skip this. But this is just to show you, like, those kind of steps were exposed with different issues, like companies that had like, or our network identified different attacks and how many attacks was on that. So it's like disrupted the life of them. So we had a huge, like, suddenly you had like fake sites or fake mails that were sent and in order to steal the identity. There were attacks on the network and on access, and like and the viruses. So I'll just try to skip on that, and I will give you a few information. Few informations that only during the COVID there was like a huge number of attacks that were stopped by the networks. Like the companies didn't feel it, but they were stopped based on different level of the prevention that were taken on that. I know that doesn't have very much about the issues of the women, but this is related indirect. And this one I just put it for information because it shows ENISA, which is European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, shows the different ways, and it's a very good mapping actually. It shows that where the attacks comes from, and it could be very useful. So now, what does this mean, like for the genders and for the enabling and empowering women? This kind of attacks, when it comes to the business, it's much harder in a public network, which is internet. And I have just identified a few of them based on experience that we have. And we know we do have from France, actually, because even in my company, sometimes we would do meetings, awareness with police to understand, like they explain to us certain things which we have to be careful, particularly in the areas which could be very dangerous. My office is in an area which is a delicate area. But we did also vice versa, the awareness of different, what could be like online attacks or violence. So one thing is that it's awareness. I'm not going to repeat it because I think all of you mentioned that. But what is important to say is that police now, like enforcement, has to get to be involved and put some more money to address this kind of take it more seriously and investing more. The government should invest more in this, because our life is going to, it's changed already, but it's going to be even more in the internet. So it's like, I didn't want to scare you about the numbers of the attacks that the networks, the companies get daily. Like, imagine what would happen to like our life or our accesses, like information. We could happen like what I mentioned in the beginning, that movie. It's not more the life of a movie. It could be any of us. We do have cases here which women are dealing with stealing identities and are facing over years in like with law enforcement and going in different places in order to get back their identity, and because they are sitting with a lot of credit, because the other person has taken a lot of credit and money, and actually she's responsible for this credit, for example. So in order for that, I think this kind of initiatives should continue further and have some kind of milestones and steps. What will be like, how we can organize different combination of awareness through, for example, gender digital safety training. It's like make them like show to different generation what kind of tools, what kind of information, make it available, guidelines how to protect themselves, what kind of procedures to make. Like, it's not enough to change your password, because it's still, there are powerful scripts and application that can just run in like in 24 hours, they can just identify your password if you are targeted. So it should be like a combination and a coordination of different entities, the government, the law enforcement, business companies, to be like this kind of combination, and the NGOs and the companies. And of course, UNDP is doing a wonderful job about that. I will not, that's why I say that Judita covered that part, but there is one aspect of social media. It's not only to make girls and women afraid about being careful about social media, because just telling the dark side, that could scare them, and just they will not connect. And I have friends, they don't even have, they don't connect to the network. They don't connect to social medias because they don't want to be exposed to this kind. But we should know that social medias today, they can play an amazing role to be to raise their voice, to be active in for causes, or be active in political issues. And that's why I have just put a couple of examples, like Me Too movement. It was a gender awareness, which is like took a proportion of worldwide. Or there are other, for example, it could be raising or exposing to experience to other countries. Like I like this Safe Cities application apps in Brazil, so make them available for the others as well. And of course, the major role in this kind of like using the digital and making useful the digital opportunities that gives this where we are today is the government. They should put the learning the learning skills on the digital should be in the schools from the beginning, should have some ICT strategies. Like I have been saying that many times to the Minister of Education in Albania last year, about like having a strategy that could like work, but to have like sustainable, because in the countries like Albania, for example, you have extreme, like you have extreme and you have areas where young generation can just build the application. They don't even need the government to learn, and they are the same level as in the technology as we are, and then in innovative. And then you have areas where they couldn't even, they don't even access internet. They don't even have a phone. In the COVID situation, they were supposed to have online learning, but they didn't have it. So that should be something. The last thing that this is just wrapping up. Actually, I have mapped what could be on the more general in like policies in the government and what they should put in place. I mapped this with which actually what I have seen in different companies, because I have been working in Norway, which is like Scandinavian are champion for that, like when it comes to gender gaps and training and putting like being up in not only in the technology but in these kind of areas and subjects. And still the Norwegian from the embassy, lady from the embassy still mentioned that they're still having issues. And this is like in what I have seen in my company, what are the priorities, like making giving more priorities to different policies, to different programs, in order to not only to make the digital easier for and to increase the skills in these areas for certain groups, but also to empower the ones that they have the skills and to have like to progress on that. And most of all, actually make it the life easier for women and accessible and in the leadership and innovation. So I hope, Luanda, I didn't took more time than was supposed to be. Thank you very much. I tried to cut it short. So, and I hopefully helped a little bit the subject, because hopefully we will get some next step, because I am coming from business. I always want to see like the light in the tunnel and what are the steps to go to that light.
Thank you, Anila. This was a really, I think, pragmatic and practical presentation, and we really appreciate your aspect from the private sector, because I feel like that is missing. And I think from our discussions with our stakeholders, this public-private partnership in different aspects is something that needs to be enhanced, needs to be maneuvered better, so both parties can benefit from each other. And this, I think, ties to also Klorenta's earlier point, which she suggested application maybe of code of conduct that public sector can do with internet service providers in the region, and to regulate different challenges that digital inclusion poses, such as cyber-based violence. I see some questions here, and I would encourage everyone to use Q&A. I'll start with the first one. Maybe this is for Anila, saying that sharing of personal information from mobile phones, companies and banks to third parties for advertisement of political parties during election times or election campaign is a challenge to Albania. How is this handled in France and regulated?
First of all, that's a very good question, actually, and it's very important that first of all, whatever we sign, read the fine prints. Normally, by all the regulations and law, the companies are not allowed to use the detail or your private information to third party. That it's like for the banks, it's available also for even any site, website. If we see like the EU in 2018 came the regulations for the private data, and this is one of the roles that this one had. So for the Albania, for example, now it's that they have to publish that they have signed this. They apply these rules. For example, regarding the banks or the other companies, you never can avoid it. Why? For example, I'll give an example. During the COVID time, the Prime Minister sent messages, even called automatically, to anyone in Albania, any citizens, without having like the right to do that. Why? Because the telecom companies allowed that. And this should have been like, for example, should have been not punished, but at least should have been some information upfront about that. The organizations like civil rights organization or other social organization, even individuals, can be like can be organized, block, and how to say it, denounce, like open a case at the at the law enforcement. So they can, even against the government. It's like it has happened, for example, in France, the ex-prime minister and minister of health, they are today under investigation for the way they were handling the situation of COVID in France. So why? Because there were like 30 people from different areas, society, that they found out different things and different breach of in different levels. So now coming back to the having information on the phone, the first thing is that try to find the phone, make it protective, like find the good applications that can make some protection. It's not bulletproof, but at least you have some firewall in a way, like in application, so can protect your if you get information about, for example, about the new election that is coming, refuse it and denounce. I mean, like go and report it, like Klorenta put some forms, report it. If you feel that this is a violence of, you haven't given the permission to the company to use your data, then report it. When you create many reports, when you do like, and then use the social media to denounce this kind of things. I don't know if I answered all, everybody satisfied with that. This is what's coming to me now, right now, but it could be even more. Like, I can think about, from my experience, I know that in US, this is it's a business actually. Having information, it's a business. And that's because that's how they have created the ground rules. You cannot avoid that because you have that credit check and all. I've been living in US and I remember the first year how it was. Like, not because we're not accepting a credit card, we couldn't have something like simple things because we didn't have credit history. And I said, well, this is like selling my information, because you had to have a credit history and a good credit in order to get, because we were using our credit card like we were using in Norway, for example, debit card. But in Europe, this is regulated by EU regulation. And there is a lot of regulation on that. So if the subject comes from an organization, this is something to be seen even further and identify what can be done so people can be prepared.
Thank you so much, Anila. Maybe another solution is go back to, the other non-smartphones. So back in the day.
This is the other smartphone. Then you will get from law informers. You'll be on the blacklist because you know who use those phones? Mafia and criminals use those phones today.
Then please disregard my comment to everyone.
I was just joking.
That was an unprofessional remark on my part.
It's true that those phones, it's not that they are undetectable, but they are much less like
detectable. All right, thank you so much. I will just read here a question. I think there are several questions in one addressed to all panelists. Maybe here we can start with Klorenta. I will read the questions here from participants, and then please just start with which one you feel applies to you. What would be the ways in which we can deter cyber violence? Would harsh punishment by law, for example, sentencing 10 to 20 years in prison for revenge porn or bullying be the solution? Or should we take more of soft mechanisms like educating students and adults on the severity of cyber violence? Also, as cyber violence takes many new forms which are not specified in law, how does law enforcement handle the reported cases?
May I, Luanda?
Yes, please, go ahead.
During my presentation, I also represented some good practices for some of the EU countries where was applied not only the fine, but also price and sentence, as the question suggests. But one of the recommendations that I would give a priority would be soft mechanisms, which means the signing of code of conducts before going to fines or to other law improvement. As far as I know, there are some articles in the penal code. Maybe Crimea may help me at this point, not only in the Republic of Albania, but also in Kosovo, since our country at least has approved, is part of the Budapest Convention, where there are some articles dedicated to cybercrime phenomena in that convention. So it is better to start from the soft laws to go then to the fines or to prison sentence. Meanwhile, following the argument of Anila, it is, if we are searching for a headline for this event, everyone should know that it is still very early days in this data as currency world, because data is the new currency. If we are working in the oil and gas industry, data will be your new currency. If you are working in the food industry, will not be superfood, but will be data, the new currency. But it is an absolutely one-side trade, which means that we sell our data, but we do not win from this trade, because it is one-sided trade. So if we are going to protect ourselves online, if we are going to protect our children online, first we should be them. We should taught them that data is their new currency, and they should be well prepared to not be mean behind the screen, and to share carefully what the others need to know about their personal experience before sharing more that it is needed online.
Luanda, may I intervene here?
Yes, Ljubisa.
Yeah,
thank
you. Yes, I absolutely agree with Anila and Klorenta, what was previously said. I will add something since we are talking about data, and I would say privacy and data protection online is very important. It's a kind of my specialty. When we are talking about data market, then we should be very careful, because it's a totally different situation, and it's totally different regulated in US and in Europe. We know that there is a kind of trade market and lawful trading with data in US, while it is not regulated at all as a question in Europe. In each country in Europe, it is very important to emphasize that there is no lawful trading with data. Of course, I agree with Klorenta saying that the next generation currency will be the data, but for sure we need to first of all regulate that and to give a legal ground to make it legal to trade and if I may say, to pay with data. Since then, there is no legal opportunity to do that in Europe. And having in mind the approach to how to deter the cyber violent cases, not only to cyber violent cases, but I would say general, I prefer somewhere hard approach, having in mind the punishment, their quality and quantity, their volume, but in somewhere soft mechanisms, because the practice, since we have in practice the General Data Protection Regulation in European Union, it clearly shows that sometimes those big companies are even want to pay more if they can, as a punishment, as a sanction, if they can trade the data with the data they have for their users or for people that have profiles, for instance, on social media. But on the other side, the practice showed that from the day when General Data Protection Regulation sanctions, which are very high, even for wealthy companies, the big business, started to produce results in practice, those sanctions were put in practice, then there are some positive changes on the way. So that's why I would suggest to practice hard and soft mechanisms, depends on for which side or in which field we are talking about. Thanks.
I would like to add something onto that. That's true, actually, the regulation is important, but by the time the regulation were in place, we had already many millions of people already with data in the internet, in the cloud, and that were already used. The other thing is that not everything can be detected, because you have today in the network with artificial intelligence that now is becoming like more and more normal, like the application and different access that you get, the information you get from different applications like Facebook or others, based on the information you get, they create a profile for you. And the moment they create a profile, so that means that you have today, and I doubt even once if you search on Google or if you buy something on Amazon, you have an identity now. You have an identity card, internet identity card or digital identity card, which you don't know, but you are surprised. And why? Because they facilitate your life in certain things. And then you say, okay, that's nice. I mean, I have done it myself. I never used to stock data in my, for example, cloud phone. And now I do it because I was fed up. Every 2 years you change the phone. Your phone is not anymore like the usage of devices and like the daily usage of anything is like doesn't last more than 2 years. You need to change the phone. You need to change the computer. You need to change everything. Like it's like we are in a society of consumption. Consumption has been for a long time. Like nothing lasts forever. And you can see even your glasses or your, I don't know, even a blouse that you get, like in 6 months, you want to change it because you see that no matter how much expensive it is not as it was like 15 or 20 years ago. The same is with the digital. So somehow you have to trade, you have to give up to certain things because you see, okay, Google, the moment you just go in Android on your phone, all your data and address list is there. I said, wow, that's great. And we forget that Google has your life, for example, or Apple, the same, whoever is like. So when it comes to go back to the question about the punishments when it comes to violence, I'll give you an example. I think the laws are very soft on punishment when it comes to cyber violence or digital or internet violence, because I think the boom of internet took every government, every country by surprise. There was no, even in Europe, even in US, there were no laws. Like laws has to be like updated and find a way, ad hoc, find around. So I will give an example which is very fresh today. A few months ago, was a girl in Instagram, a French girl, and it's very known now as a case. She just published something. It was related to a terrorist attack that was made to a professor at a lycée in France. He was beheaded, actually. It was terrible. And then she made a comment about that, which she expressed something. Somebody pushed her, and then she made even harder, a more generic comment about Islamism. And she was attacked I mean, like in social medias for that, at that level that it took very long time before the law enforcement has to grip in, because her life was in danger. Now she had to get out of the Instagram, but her life was in danger because it happened to a professor. They found where they lived, they found where they worked, and they just killed him. So that was like only a boomerang. And like the problem was that how do you punish this kind of aggressive things? How do you punish things that like they come out with false identity? And how do you punish? I mean, even the organization didn't react it pretty well, like because you are in the middle, like you have to be politically correct. So there are many aspects that we don't see the long-term effect that could be. So I think, and this is to address to Ikramia, the law should be very hard, even bullying, even revenge, even whatever, because it's horrible, because it can have a very immediate effect in the life of the person who has been threatened online. I have many examples of that, but I don't want to make this beautiful panel like sad. And we're talking about countries like France, which like well established and everything works pretty well.
Definitely not sad, but I think it just reflects the reality at hand, that the extent and how real the violence online is, and what impact can have, whether that is with actually physical, sexual violence, or even somebody's death or suicide, for example. So I think I want to take this opportunity and thank each and every one of you for presenting your expertise. And I think today we have raised so many issues that we can discuss over a number of days and just not in a couple of hours. But let this be a start of discussion and further cooperation between us and between UNDP and Women for Cyber Foundation, and see how we can cooperate among each other to address these issues in our respective jurisdiction, but also together, since Ikramia emphasized how transnational cybercrime can be, and violence is not excluded from this, and can violence against women through internet online can be done 10,000 kilometers away. So I would like to give couple wrap-up points here and then pass on the floor to Klorenta, our co-host for the event, for some concluding remarks. So generally, what we heard today, there are 4 elements which characterize cyber violence and distinguish, or cyberbullying, and distinguish it from harmless forms of online behavior such as teasing or cyber arguing. And these are intent to hurt. The perpetrators has the intention to hurt the victim by causing her or him intentional loss of reputation in the society and or at work, and destroy her family relations or inflicting other sorts of damage. Second would be recurrent behavior and an ongoing process in which the victim is repeatedly abused. This can be taken literally by posting consecutive message or flows from the fact that the posted message can be shared, reposted, and may remain online indefinitely. Non-consensual distribution of intimate messages. Perpetrators of this type of offense often target young people and adult women, but also minorities and other vulnerable groups. Production and exchange of sexually explicit images can be used for criminal activities such as online stalking or cyber stalking, sextortion, that fit into the general category of cyber harassment and are mainly targeted at women and girls. And imbalance in power. This is whether in the physical world, the bullying perpetrators has more social esteem or physical powers. So these would be the 4 general criteria. It is another point that is critical to recall that many forms of cyber violence are already covered in domestic or international law by the physical world provisions, and investigations might need not to wait for new legislation. For example, when computers are used to cause or facilitate violence through transmission of messages that cause psychological harm, or through advertisement for murder, rape, kidnapping, or trafficking in human beings, such cases may be prosecuted as assault or violation of privacy, illegal threat, extortion, solicitation of rape or murder, illegal distribution of content, domestic violence, and so on. Furthermore, given the dependence on computer systems, including psychological, physical, and economic dependence, some types of cyber crime, such as illegal access to intimate personal data or destruction of data, may also be considered acts of cyber violence. Now on to digital transformation. We have several points here made by our last 2 speakers. The genuine apprehension on how the digital transformation affects women's overall well-being is one of the cornerstones for further improvement of women's life in the digital environment. The facts indicate that every 6th crime is committed through social media. The digital world is an advantage only for those who have appropriate skills. Therefore, the societies need to work continuously on developing and promoting specific skills. So besides digital skills, to focus also on emotional skills that are essential to safely maneuvering the online world, and together on a global scale on creation and maintenance of safe digital domain. The last point in digital transformation, it's actually to practice to acknowledge actually the prominent role of industry players, and it's highly recommended that they would sensitize the work in that spirit by putting on effective and efficient takedown procedures for harmful and malicious substance, count termination for unlawful demeanor, for example, as well as publishing transparent reports of cyber violence against women, among other, as raising awareness tool. Now, not all of forms of or instances of cyber violence are equally severe, and not all of them necessarily require a criminal law solution, but may be addressed by a graded approach and a combination of preventive, educational, protective, and other measures. So there is need for awareness-raising campaign, educating women and girls on cyber violence against girls and women, their legal rights, but as well as available support services. Training on cyber violence against women and gender with a gender perspective should be introduced to police responses to cybercrime through manuals and dedicated workshops in national levels. Prevention measures should be developed that included the ICT sector, including adoption of self-regulatory standards to avoid harmful gender stereotyping and the spreading of degrading images of women or imagery that associates sex with violence. For example, sign of code of conduct between the biggest internet service providers and respective government stakeholders or institution authorities here in Kosovo. This would be all in my side, and I would now give the floor to Klorenta for her final remarks and concluding of this event.
Thank you, Luanda. I enjoyed this wonderful panel. I would like once again to thank Anilia for her presentation, and also Lisa and your team for supporting us in order to co-organize this event. For the whole audience, I would like to emphasize a last sentence where when Mark Zuckerberg were asked from the Congress, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service? His answer was that, Senator, we run ads. This means that if you are not paying for the product, you are the product, you are not the customer. So we come back to the aspect of data is the new currency. If we cannot change the policy of Facebook or the internet as a whole, which we say that it is free to use, but actually it is not because it is a one-sided trade, then what we can do is to run awareness campaigns for everyone in our community, also to raise the capacities of the police officers who are working on reporting the cybercrime happening in our ecosystem, and to prepare some escalation procedures after the reports to be handled. And this cannot be without the help of the community of the cyber professionals. So count on us every time that in the national level you would need support. On behalf of Women for Cyber Albania chapter, I would like once again to thank you for this opportunity, and we are looking forward to other fruitful collaborations like this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Klorenta. Thank you, all panelists. It was brilliant remarks on all your parts, and I wish you a good afternoon.